Another development that should be highlighted here as well is the fact that Ukraine is going to double drone production this year. This is incredible. Again, Ukraine produced 3.5 million drones last year. By the way, the US, by comparison, produces about 300,000 to 400,000. This year, reportedly, and I met with several of the drone companies and even visited some of the manufacturing facilities, this year, I know of one company that's going to produce 3 million themselves, and the overall country production reportedly will be 7 million. That is an astonishing number of drones that can be thrown at Russians all day, every day, into the Russian Federation as well, because some of these are longer range. I mentioned again the cruise missile, the Flamingo, 3,000 kilometers is a longer range than the US Tomahawk cruise missile, and it also has a larger warhead. So all of these developments in what is becoming the arsenal of democracy, in the way that the United States was the arsenal of democracy for World War II. And by the way, when the guns fall silent, this arsenal of democracy is going to rearm, and arm Europe with the weapons they really need, as opposed to more of what they already have. Even in the United States, where there's big concern about police forces using DJI drones from China, who's going to replace those? Again, companies from Ukraine can absolutely do that. So there's a lot of very, very impressive developments ongoing, even as there is this very, very serious hardship being endured by the Ukrainian people. Still the challenges of those in the front lines, without question. I'm going to be back there, in fact, at the end of March and early April. And I want to talk a bit about what I believe should become known as Ukraine's greatest generation. Remember, that's the term that was used for those Americans who fought in World War II, helped win the war, kept the world safe for democracy, and then came home and built the greatest country in the world. And I think that we're seeing on the battlefield already, and in the areas of innovation, Ukraine's greatest generation. And when there is a cessation of hostilities, all of a sudden this incredible skill in design, manufacturing, and use is going to be exported to the world, and it's going to be an entire new economy for Ukraine. Ukraine is not going back to the old extractive industries and huge factories that used to be one of its hallmarks.
I think it's actually very unhelpful when he or Mr. Witkoff or the president or somebody talks about we're 95% there, except for the most important part. So I think that's not helpful.
Do you think that this issue of territory, Donbas region, is a solvable one?
Yeah, Russia could leave and recognize this as Ukrainian sovereign territory. I don't know. Of course, who am I to say that to Ukrainians you should keep fighting, because I'm here in Munich. I'm not the one sitting in a trench outside Pokrovsk or my apartment getting Shahed drones. So this is only the Ukrainians can decide that. But I think your president, the leadership in Ukraine, Ukrainian people, every Ukrainian I speak to is like, no way. There's no way you can. And nobody believes, regardless of what the U.S. administration says, nobody believes that'll be it, that Russia will be satisfied just to get that last bit of dump, then they'll be good. Nobody believes that. And, Russia's not going to agree to a ceasefire, or they won't live up to it, let's say it that way. So I think Ukrainians have to be the ones to decide. I'd be very surprised if they agreed to it.
So you're confident that Donbas region is not endgame for Vladimir Putin?
No, absolutely not. No, I mean, they basically say that. And I think, why should anybody think that that's all they wanted? I think I've listened to Lavrov, I listened to Putin, I listened to Medvedev and Kirill, all these guys. They haven't backed down on anything. And so the president has got his own timeline that's tied somehow to business deals, I think, that are probably already signed between Americans and Russians. I think they've already done this, and they're going to unveil it after what they think is going to be an agreement sometime this summer. That's why the president's pushing, by June, so that they can then unveil huge business deals just in time for the 4th of July and the 250th birthday of America. I mean, I don't think that's the kind of thing that Ukrainians or Europeans, and frankly most Americans, would support.
Russia's war against Ukraine has now lasted longer than Soviet Union's war against the Nazi Germany. And also we are nearing the 4th anniversary of this brutal war against Ukraine. What does this tell you about Putin's war strategy, about Russia?
Of course, casualties don't matter to him, but two things do matter to him. One is, can he stay in power? And I think as long as the economy is still able to generate enough money to keep the war going, he's going to do it. Which is why I think Ukraine's strategy of destroying Russia's oil and gas infrastructure is such a good strategy. The other thing is he's pretty confident, obviously, that the United States is going to do nothing to stop him. And I think he believes that Europe is also not really going to be able to fill that gap. And so therefore, he's going to keep going until he's forced to realize that all of Europe and Canada are with Ukraine, and they're going to give Ukraine what it needs to be able to defeat Russia. When he sees that, then I think they will have to recalculate in the Kremlin. But right now, they don't think that's coming yet.
Can Putin end this war without losing his grip on power?
That'll be very difficult. He's going to have a million unhappy veterans coming home to what? To an economy that's trash. I think that's what he does not want, is to have all these troops coming back home without having something to show for it. So I think it'd be difficult for him. Of course, his job security is not my concern. My concern is security and stability and prosperity for all of Europe, which includes Ukraine.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said today that, quote, "I'm younger than Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. That's why I have more leverage." What is your reaction to this?
Well, number one, it's a true statement. Number two, when I see your president, how he interacts with soldiers and people and world leaders, I mean, you can't fake that the whole time. I mean, it's a genuine positive leader who's been an incredible leader for Ukraine and an example for everyone else. Nothing about Vladimir Putin that anybody that came to this conference wants to emulate.
Can Ukraine face this war indefinitely? And don't you think that this massive attrition is not on our side? Because Russia has certainly more manpower, more resources.
Well, okay. I think the Russian advantage in manpower is maybe overstated. I mean, why are they bringing in North Koreans, grabbing immigrants who thought they were coming to work in a factory and instead are ending up in the Donbas? I think Russia does have some manpower challenges. So Ukraine's in a different position. You're defending. And what seems to have happened on the front, the creation of the kill zone in Ukraine seems to have been able to, you don't have as many troops exposed there maybe as conventionally you would have. I think, and also there's probably about 2 million Ukrainians that are still out there that are doing other things, important jobs for the country, but could also be soldiers. So I think the manpower advantage of Russia is there, but it's not decisive.
Russia has hit another record high in December. Russian troops have lost 35,000 soldiers killed and wounded, and according to Bloomberg, in January they couldn't replace 9,000 troops, couldn't replenish this losses. Ukrainian defense minister, meanwhile, Mikhailo Fedorov, says that his aim is to knock out at least 50,000 Russian troops every month, killed and wounded.
That's a worthy objective. But I think it's just as important, in my view, also to destroy Russia's oil and gas infrastructure, to destroy their core strength, which is the logistics, the headquarters. If you take that out, then it almost doesn't matter how many Russian infantry there are if you have destroyed their logistics and the headquarters and their artillery and, of course, the Shahed drone factory, those kinds of things.
As we are nearing 4th anniversary of this brutal war against Ukraine, how can you assess the main results of Ukrainian deep strikes? Because there has been a lot of coverage right now in the media of this campaign against oil refineries, against military infrastructure, and also Ukraine has begun using its own long-range drones and missiles.
Yeah. Well, of course, I always enjoyed watching when reporters would show, here's a oil refinery in some part of Russia, seeing it on fire, and you don't see that as much. I don't know that means it's not still happening. The Russians, of course, would not want that being advertised, what they're losing. But the key is, what's their production, and also what's the price of oil? I mean, it's gotten down so low that this has a very negative impact on Russia's ability to finance the war. So I would say this seems to me to be a very wise strategy. And I think we in the West should be finding more weapons to help and ways to help increase Ukraine's ability to produce those kinds of capabilities. Does
Vladimir Putin regret invading Ukraine from your perspective, taking into account this
if he does, I can't imagine he would ever say that publicly. I mean, he doesn't seem like the kind of guy to say, this is a huge mistake on my part. So I can't imagine what kind of conversations and heated debates go on inside the Kremlin or wherever he is. I would imagine that there are some people that keep him in power that are like, hey, you are destroying us. Or else he doesn't know what's really going on. I don't believe that. All I heard for the last years was former KGB, he's so smart. He's playing three-dimensional chess, and all that. So if somebody says, well, his people are not giving him the truth, that's bullshit. If he doesn't know, then it's his own fault.
He also used to wear military uniform all the time to continue his propaganda trips to Russian troops on the ground inside Ukraine and in Russia. Also, I would like to get back to the beginning of this full-scale war as we are nearing the 4th anniversary, and let's also speak about Prigozhin march on Moscow. Don't you think that was probably the most dangerous moment for Vladimir Putin?
That's a good point. I think that was not a attempted coup. Of course, that was a mutiny that really was about business. I think Prigozhin was very unhappy with Shoigu's attempt to gain control over all the various mercenary companies, and so he did that. What was most interesting to me is how almost nobody did anything. I mean, they were even cheered in Rostov, I think.
No one stopped him.
Yeah, and there's, except maybe the mayor of Moscow, putting up some barriers, but really, there was not a strong, I think people were waiting to see, like, what's going to happen here. And so that probably was a pretty, and of course, that's why Prigozhin's dead.
As we are also assessing the past events, The Atlantic recently interviewed Ukrainian President Zelensky, and The Atlantic journalist asked President Zelensky whether Ukraine should have settled this war in 2022 after a successful battle for Kyiv, Kharkiv, Kherson, because U.S. former general right now, Mark Milley, advised Ukrainians in 2022 to settle the war. What is your take on this?
Well, who are we to advise the president of Ukraine to say, hey, let the Russians keep that. Well, we would never accept that, I think, in the U.S., at least I hope not. And, these parts of Russian-occupied territory, that's not dirt, or some empty real estate place in Manhattan. These are Ukrainian people. And I don't know how President Zelensky could have done that, especially when he could see, probably already could feel, the potential of his own soldiers and the weaknesses of the Russian side. So I don't know if he would make the same decision today. I expect he would.
We didn't cover security guarantees for Ukraine. There have been lots of discussion about it. Is this offer worse, even considering this 24 hours for response of Ukrainian troops, 48 hours for coalition of the willing response, and then 72 hours for possible U.S. involvement in that? But this is still an open question.
Well, first of all, at least what I've read is that Ukraine would have to agree to give up all these things before the guarantee would. Okay, that's a problem already. I have zero confidence that we would live up to that. I've seen nothing from the administration that tells me that they would be willing to do a real U.S. response in this kind of great. I mean, it sounds good. I'm just skeptical. If we're not even willing to give Ukraine more ammunition and things, why would this administration all of a sudden be willing to, whether it was air power or land power, to go a response against the Russians? I've seen nothing from them that tells me that they would actually follow through on that. So President Zelensky, I think, is very wise to say he wants to see that this was like a treaty where the Congress ratifies it, and that's more than just some. That's much more than, say, the Budapest Memorandum, for example.
How do you see the possible endgame for this war? Because right now, even President Zelensky says that Ukraine does not have enough resources, manpower to conduct large counteroffensive operations. At the same time, Russians trying to move forward at high cost. They have incremental gains, but they still move forward. Even if we stop them right now, prevent moving forward, they still can firing missiles and drones at Ukrainians.
Yeah, well, that of course, that is the I imagine must be the most difficult thing that your president is having to think through. How much longer, our city is going to have to do this. But I think that the strategy of destroying Russia's ability to sell oil and gas to China and India and Turkey and other countries, it's a winning strategy, especially if Europe helps with stopping the Shadow Fleet vessels. So only the leadership of Ukraine can make that decision. It would be wrong for me to say, no, hang in there, or let them have it, because at the end of the day, I think they know that the Russians will absolutely keep coming, even if there's a 1-year pause or whatever. It's not over.
There have been some interesting war games in the media about the possible confrontation between Europe and Russia. How can you assess the readiness of European nations to defend itself right now, and what kind of threat does Russia pose to Europe right now?
Well, of course, the best way to protect Europe is to make sure that Ukraine wins. I mean, not one German soldier, British soldier, Polish, would ever have to die, as long as they provided to Ukraine everything that you need. That's the best way to make sure that Russia never attacks the rest of Europe. Ukraine obviously is a part of Europe. Secondly, if Ukraine fails and Russia eventually is able to achieve whatever its goals are, and then within another year or two, I imagine they would be prepared to attack into Latvia, for example, or Lithuania. It's a real possibility.
Final question, and I would appreciate a short answer. Head of the Munich Security Conference, the day before conference, said that if there is a ceasefire in Ukraine, there would be a much larger threat by Russia to Europe, to European nations. Do you agree with that?
I guess it depends on the nature of how do we get to a ceasefire. Russia cannot defeat Ukraine, so I don't think they're prepared to take on NATO if they think that NATO is actually ready. But I would say that the Europeans are finally waking up to the understanding that Russia is already at war with Europe. All these gray zone operations, this is already Russian war. That is a precursor to actual kinetic combat. So if they don't start taking real action to stop Russian gray zone operations, then I think the risk goes up.